Hi everyone, my name's Lianne, for those of you that don't know me. My research is an exploration of school and young people's perceptions and experiences within school units. So the kind of context to the research and the reasons why I'm doing this is because exclusions have got negative long-term impacts for young people, but they're continuing to rise, and they have been sort of for the last 10 years, I think. In-school units have been something that have been an initiative sort of given by schools to kind of delay that formal exclusion process. And the thing is that they're unmonitored, and it means that schools aren't held accountable for their use. We also know that they're quite prevalent, but there's no kind of research or understanding or sort of idea of what a good model is. And recently there's been policy that's going to suggest a kind of continued use for in-school units. So people have been, I think there was recently a consultation that came out suggesting that they're going to be used and they're going to be called removal rooms. And there was the independent review by Bennett as well, who kind of said that removing a young person from the classroom should be seen as a positive solution. So it's just intrigued me as to, these kind of in-school units are still an exclusionary form in many cases, and they negate the evidence that we have. So it's just made me query sort of the evidence base, and I want to know more kind of, especially from young people and from the local authority, as there's no kind of support there about where behaviour is being managed and how it's supported sort of via a wider context. And a lot of policy within schools is kind of focused on a behaviourist underpinning. So I've put Lewin's behaviour equation down there to sort of highlight that behaviour is a function of the interaction between the person and their environment. And I feel that in-school units and kind of these behaviour policies that exist tend to be on a behaviourist underpinning, as I say, so it's kind of the consequence comes after the action. So yeah, it kind of just raises implications for teams within the local authority, such as behaviour teams and educational psychologists, because there's not much evidence out there about how we're working with those at risk of exclusion. So my methods, I had two kind of overarching research questions. One was about exploring in-school units within one local authority, and the second one was about exploring young people's perceptions and experiences. And it was deliberately done in two phases because I needed to understand what in-school units were and how they operate before I could understand what I needed to ask young people. So within phase one, there were 4 schools that took part and 4 members of staff, and 3 members of the behaviour team within the local authority. And then within phase 2, there were 8 young people across 2 schools, and I used a thematic analysis approach to find my themes. So I'll just leave this up for a second so you can kind of have a glance, but these are the adults' views from phase 1. And within theme 1, I kind of found the discrepancy between the procedure and the use of in-school units. So I thought I'd kind of just flash up some quotes to highlight some of these quite broadly. So I've kind of cherry picked the ones that are quite interesting. So somebody here, an assistant head teacher, said, as a means to be able to improve low-level disruption and low-level problems, it's good as punishment. Asenko said, from an adult point of view, people feel that the child has had a consequence. I think they feel that it's been dealt with. The member of the local authority said, I don't think that the in-school unit support, it's a punishment. It doesn't find out why they're there, what's happened, hearing their voices or helping them to move forward. Within the second theme, there was a lot around kind of the strengths and needs of schools and how schools are helping to try and meet those needs. And within that, I kind of found a sort of sub-theme of a promoted use of in-school units. There was quite a lot of factors that promoted that use. So, for example, behaviour expectations were one of those. And this member of staff here, deputy head teacher, he said, if you raise your bar of what's acceptable and what's going to be punished, you've got to demonstrate what's going to be challenged. You lay your line in the sand, you don't deviate from it, which is where a lot of your initial isolation will come from. And sorry, I should have said at the start, I chose the term in-school unit to kind of encompass a whole load of terms. It's quite hard to find in the literature. But there were a range of names they were referred to as. So lots of people did refer to them as isolation, some mentioned reflection. But yeah, in-school unit kind of, I tried to encompass it and go with a neutral term because I didn't know what I was going to find at that point. So then kind of following on from this and kind of promoting exclusions really, a head teacher said that if there's a repeat. So a lot of the kind of reasons in the exclusion data is persistent disruptive behaviour, and from what I could find in this evidence here was that similar reasons were for going to the in-school unit as well. And this kind of questions, I guess, their effectiveness, because a head teacher said if there is a repeat, effectively it could lead to an exclusion for persistent disruptive behaviour. And then finally, there was a theme that kind of encompassed the support that is available from the local authority and from other kind of wider agencies. And it was quite an interesting finding, because the behaviour teams and EPs, as I said, there's not much in research about what we can do to prevent exclusions. And they talked about an experience they had at the primary school. So they said there was a primary school we knew was using a particular room and was almost holding children there. We had to bring in a lot of legislation and show the danger. Following that, the room doesn't exist anymore, which is really positive, but it's all of the little illegal niche rooms that we hear about. As soon as we hear about them, we do our best to address them with the school and conversations that we have with the head teachers to help them think about their stance as an organisation. So I felt that this was kind of a key finding, because when they were aware of their presence, they might not have always been very transparent that they were operating. But when they were aware, they kind of made it their role to show them alternatives. So then I interviewed young people. So young people were across 2 secondary schools, and they sort of varied from year 8 to year 11. And these are kind of the key themes that I found from young people to answer what their perceptions and experiences were. So in terms of thinking about the negative impacts and being removed from the classroom, I've got different quotes from some of the young people here. So someone said, "You're just out of class, you do classwork, but not in the actual classroom with everyone else." So it was kind of highlighting that they were removed and being different from everybody else. Someone else said, it was closed, there was no supervisor really, and they don't even see what you're doing. They give us work to do, but they don't check it to see if we've done it. So there was kind of that frustration that they were given work, but it wasn't actually acknowledged. And sorry, I just realised I've got one more quote here I just wanted to read. So they talked a little bit about the labels of the room. So someone said, if you're bad in the exclusion room, you get put in there for another day of isolation until you reflect on what you've been doing. And I think that quote kind of really stood out in what I was saying about the label of the room. So they've kind of referred to it as exclusion, isolation and reflection, and it all seems a little bit muddled about what the expectation is for that room. With regards to the second thing that came out, there was kind of a lack of clarity and sense of injustice of what was happening for these young people. And particularly with those sort of injustices, there was sort of unstructured supervision, unstructured reflection. So someone here, he kind of demonstrates that by saying that you're thinking about why you've done it, why you're in there, why did I skip the detention, and not to do it again. And then here we've got someone commenting on their sort of social injustice of being socially excluded. He said, "I rarely see the teacher. If I do, they'll be in the office with the door shut, walking around a building or teaching. They're rarely with you. I'll take anyone to talk to throughout the day." So quite an interesting finding as well was that in-school units were either in rooms, or they were in corridors, or they were in available classroom, that there wasn't always a designated area for them to be operating in. And this one I thought was very reflective. This was a young person, I believe, in year 8. She said, "Being in that one room all day, I feel like I'm locked up in a cage. If there's people with anxiety or bad mental health problems, they may get overwhelmed in there, or maybe ADHD or autism, they might get overwhelmed. And I feel like they should be more careful with them." And I thought, if someone this young is able to articulate so eloquently, then people should be listening. Then the third thing kind of thought about what the preferences were for the room and what people did like about the environment, and also what they would do to improve in-school units in future. So someone said it's quiet, you get to focus on your work, and they'd rather be in there than normal classes. It's really calm and they enjoy it. Somebody else said, to make the room better, I don't think they should silence you. I think that they teach us to work independently, but sometimes you need people to work. And there was quite a lot around this kind of quote here. So I want them to send people who actually deserve it. Don't be putting someone in there for something silly. Put someone in there if you actually mean it. And this I thought was just a brilliant quote from a year 11. So I thought I'd just leave it there with you to have a moment to read of what an in-school unit actually is. I'm aware of time, so I'll kind of skip over these as quick as I can. But in terms of thinking about implications for the future, for EPs, I feel that we need to be really promoting our skills in being able to work with those that are at risk of exclusion. I think that we'll be able to help broaden people's thinking, that interactionist perspective, so rather than operating on that behaviourist understanding which alienates kind of reflection and things like that, and to help kind of unpick labels. Behaviour teams, again, I feel that they've got an area for doing lots of training, particularly in things like restorative approaches, and advertising their services so people can buy them in. For schools, I feel that they can sort of consider making a name change to in-school units, making them something quite positive to reflect, positive, meaningful intervention, and just to take ownership of wanting to prevent exclusions, but obviously with taking the support that's available to them. And finally, just for policymakers, so as there's this continued argument for their use, I think that we need to be thinking about the pressures they're putting on, what they need to be thinking about pressures they're putting on schools, particularly in relation to Ofsted, and how that kind of excludes those that don't conform, I guess, to everybody else. So yeah, that was a very quick overview.